Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to unpack complex ideas and give you the strategic insights you need. Today, we're really getting into the leads of performance management. Think standard cost, setting those crucial standards, and this technique called flexing budgets.
Yeah.
Yeah, our sources lay out a pretty clear roadmap. The mission today: go beyond just defining terms. We want to show you how standard costing is actually used. And maybe more importantly, dig into the thinking behind setting good standards. It's trickier than it sounds.
Absolutely. This is, fundamental stuff for effective management. Standard costing isn't just bean counting for accountants. It's your main intelligence system. It gives you that yardstick, that baseline to see what's really going on. Helps you separate the real issues from just, random noise. And once you get how standards are set and how budgets flex, you stop sort of guessing about performance problems. You can actually pinpoint causes. So we're going to tackle 4 main areas today. First, just how standard costs are used. Second, the thinking behind setting those standards. Third, a key principle, fairness, really. And fourth, keeping budgets useful when things change.
Okay, let's start with the basics then. Section 1. The core tool itself. Why do managers even need standard costs? I mean, what's the payoff beyond just like putting numbers in a budget?
Well, the budget part is key, obviously. They're baked in budgeting, setting your expectations. But the real power, and our sources really hammer this home, is in variance investigation. That's the strategic bit.
Variance investigation, meaning looking at why actual costs are different from the standard costs.
Exactly. A good standard cost system is designed to break down those differences. It compartmentalizes them.
So instead of just one big number saying you overspent, it tells you where and potentially why.
Precisely. And this is super important. It forces you to look at different types of variance. Let's take materials, for example. You might see a total material cost overrun. Okay, fine. But a good use of standard costing system splits that. It tells you, hang on, there are 2 potential problems here.
Okay. Tell us about those 2, because I imagine that affects who you talk to about fixing it, right? That ties into the controllability thing we'll discuss later.
You got it. First, there's the material price variance. Simple idea. Did we pay more or less for the raw materials than we expected based on the standard price?
Okay, and that might be something the purchasing department handles. Or maybe it's just market prices went nuts.
Often, yes. It might be uncontrollable for the production manager on the floor. It could be purchasing negotiations, supply chain issues, things like that. But then the second part is the material usage variance, sometimes called efficiency variance. This asks, did the production team use the standard quantity of material for the units they actually produced?
So this is about waste, spoilage, using too much material per item.
Exactly. Did they have setup problems? Were there quality issues causing scrap? This is usually something the production manager can influence. Direct control. The system gives you these clear examples, highlighting operational issues or successes, letting management focus efforts effectively.
So standard costs break down that big, scary cost overrun number into actionable pieces. Price variance might go to purchasing. Usage variance goes to the production floor. It shifts from just reporting results to actively managing why they happen.
It's the feedback loop, right? Was the problem price, something maybe external, or was it efficiency, something internal we need to fix? Crucial distinction.
Okay, that makes sense. But it all hinges on the standard itself being, well, good. Which brings us to section 2. How do you even set these standards? This feels like where the real judgment calls happen.
Oh, it absolutely is. Setting standards is a major strategic choice, not just a technical exercise. And our sources highlight a key contrast here, a philosophical difference, really. It's about ideal standards versus practice standards. Understanding this difference is critical.
Ideal standards. Okay, the name kind of gives it away. Perfect world stuff.
Pretty much. What performance could be under absolutely optimal conditions? Think 0 machine downtime, perfect materials, no waste, fastest possible work rate, no breaks. You get the idea.
Sounds great in theory, but impossible in reality.
By definition, yes. They are generally unattainable day to day, and that's why we have the alternative. Practice standards. These are set at a level that's considered reasonably achievable under normal, efficient operating conditions. They deliberately build in allowances for things like normal material shrinkage, expected maintenance downtime, realistic work breaks.
Okay, that distinction feels huge from a people perspective. If ideal standards are impossible, why use them? Wouldn't people just get demotivated if they never hit the target?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's a real risk. Ideal standards might be used for, say, long-term planning, or maybe strategic pricing decisions where you want to model the lowest possible cost scenario. But you're right, for motivating your actual teams, holding them to an ideal standard they can never reach, that can backfire badly. If there's always an unfavorable variance, people might just stop caring about the standard altogether. It feels unfair.
Hmm.
So successful companies, according to the sources, tend to use practice standards for regular performance measurement because hitting them feels like a genuine accomplishment. It's seen as fair, achievable with good effort. That helps maintain motivation.
So it's about picking the right tool for the job, ideal for maybe long-term vision, practice for day-to-day management.
Generally, yes. But whichever you choose, the whole system's credibility depends on the inputs, the information used for setting standards. Is it accurate? Is it current?
Right. Garbage in, garbage out. If the engineering study was sloppy, or you're using last year's material prices when they've doubled,
Then the variance report is meaningless noise. It doesn't tell you anything useful. The effort, the rigor in setting accurate, up-to-date standards, that's the hitting foundation of a good control system.
and this idea of fairness, of setting achievable standards, links directly to our next section, right? The principle of controllability.
Exactly. It's about making sure the performance management system is seen as fair and constructive, not just a tool for blame.
So what is the principle of controllability, fundamentally?
It's simple in concept. Managers should only be held accountable, judged, rewarded, penalized for costs or revenues that they actually have the authority or ability to influence.
Okay, so don't blame the factory supervisor for the cost of the new corporate jet.
Precisely. Or, less dramatically, think about that supervisor again. They can control labor scheduling, maybe reduce idle time, ensure teams work efficiently. Those labor efficiency variances, fair game. That's controllable. But that supervisor probably has zero say over the factory rent or the depreciation charge on machinery bought by head office or, the CEO's bonus, which might be allocated down as corporate overhead.
So when accounting does allocate those big, fixed, maybe corporate-level costs down to departments, which they often do for inventory costing, those need to be clearly flagged.
Absolutely. They must be marked as non-controllable on that supervisor's performance report. Otherwise, what happens? Morale plummets. If someone gets a bad review because of costs they had absolutely no power over, they'll just think the system is rigged. It completely undermines the point.
It's about making sure the report used for managing performance is different from the one used for just valuing inventory, perhaps. The management report needs to focus on what that specific manager can actually, manage.
Yes. Focus on the variable costs they influence, maybe some discretionary fixed costs like, training budgets or local maintenance they authorize. It keeps the focus on finding and fixing problems they can actually do something about.
Violate controllability. And you basically signal mistrust or maybe a lack of understanding of what people's jobs really entail. Responsibility needs to line up with authority.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, so we've got standard costs, how to set them, and the need for fairness through controllability. Let's move to the last piece. Flexing budgets. Why is this so important?
Flexing. This is crucial because, let's face it, reality rarely unfolds exactly as planned in the budget, especially when it comes to sales volume or production output. The importance and usefulness here come from a major limitation of a static, fixed budget. If your actual activity level, the number of widgets you actually made or sold, is way different from what you budgeted.
Then comparing your actual spending to that original fixed budget is kind of pointless, right?
Totally pointless. Imagine the sales team knocks it out of the park. You produce 50% more units than budgeted. Of course, your total material cost, your total labor cost is going to be higher than the original budget plan for fewer units.
Yeah, if you just look at the fixed budget, the production manager looks like they blew the budget wide open.
Exactly. They might look like a failure when actually they might have been incredibly efficient managing that unexpected extra volume. Flexing the budget solves this. It's the process of adjusting the original budget figures to show what costs should have been for the actual level of activity achieved.
Okay, so how does that work? You don't just scale everything up or down, do you?
No, and this is where understanding cost behavior is key. Remember fixed versus variable costs. That's critical for the preparation of a flexible budget. You only flex the variable costs. If your standard says material cost is $10 per unit and you actually made 1,500 units instead of the planned 1,000.
Then the flexible budget for materials should be $1,500 times $10, so $15,000.
Correct. Regardless of what the original 1,000 unit budget said for materials, But, and this is crucial, your fixed costs like rent or manager salaries, they typically stay the same within a relevant range.
Ah, right. Rent doesn't usually go up just because you made more units this month.
Exactly. So those remain at their original budgeted level in the flexible budget.
So the magic happens when you compare the actual costs incurred to make those 1,500 units against this new flexible budget calculated for 1,500 units.
Yeah.
Any difference left over? That's the real variance.
That's the real measure of efficiency and spending control, yes. It strips out the impact of the volume change. It lets you see if you spent too much per unit, controlling for the fact you made more units overall.
So it isolates the operational performance, like that material usage variance we talked about earlier, from just the sheer effect of selling more or less than planned.
Precisely. It ensures you're asking the right questions. Did we manage costs well, given the actual workload? It provides a much fairer, much more insightful comparison, the highest quality data for control.
Okay, that pulls it all together nicely. So let's recap the journey we've taken. We kicked off looking at why standard costs are used, not just for budgeting, but critically for that variance investigation, splitting things like price versus efficiency.
Mhm. Then we tackled the tricky strategic part, deriving standards. That core choice between the aspirational, maybe unattainable ideal standard and the more motivating, realistic practice standard.
Followed by the absolute necessity of controllability, making sure people are only held accountable for what they can actually influence. Fairness is key.
Yeah, connecting responsibility with authority. And finally, we looked at flexing budgets, the technique to keep your comparisons relevant when actual activity levels drift from the plan, essential for meaningful analysis.
These four elements really form the backbone of a solid performance control system.
They provide the structure, definitely. But remember what we said about setting standards. The system's only as good as the targets you put into it.
Which leads us to a final thought for you, the listener. We talked about that choice, ideal versus practice standards. It relied heavily on that initial decision. So if a company consistently uses challenging ideal standards, and maybe unsurprisingly, consistently falls short, is that failure actually useful? Does it push people towards innovation, towards finding ways to bridge that gap?
Or does it just lead to burnout? Cynicism? When does that constant feeling of missing the mark become counterproductive? It's a tough balancing act for management. Is the potential long-term gain from striving for the ideal worth the very real risk to morale? Or are there times when you need to consciously switch back to practice standards just to reset things, to rebuild belief that the targets are fair and achievable? That's the strategic tension you really need to grapple with.
That's one to think about. Until next time, keep diving deep.